The waiter at the last stop cafe handed me a note, and I would have given anything not to unfold it. This wasn't my first stop here. Last stop. The name was either a tribute to black humor or a bad omen. But for truckers like me, exhausted from hours of racing down the night highway, this place was the only beacon for 100 miles around. It stood on the outskirts, at a fork in the road that civilization had forgotten to turn onto. Gas, bad coffee, a questionable burger, and a restroom where you wouldn't hesitate to take your shoes off to avoid slipping. That's all we needed. That evening, the parking lot in front of the cafe was empty. Not a single truck, not a single car. Just my multi-ton red Volvo, dusty and tired, and a couple of broken lamps casting yellow, dying circles of light onto the asphalt. I killed the engine, and the ensuing silence deafened me. Not the kind of silence you get in the city. A resonant one, filled with the echoes of life. This was a grave, absolute silence, as if the world beyond this island of light had ceased to exist. The cafe door gave way inward with an unpleasant jingle of a bell. The air was stale and smelled of old oil, fried onions and something else. Sweetish and musty, like in an abandoned basement. No one was behind the counter. The interior was plunged into semi-darkness. Only the neon light above the bar and a TV under the ceiling were glowing, showing silent frames of some old comedy. The actors' faces stretched into unnatural smiles but made no sound, and then I saw him. The waiter. He was standing in the shadows by the far table, completely motionless, blending into the darkness, and seemed to have been watching me the whole time. Tall, lean, in a white, painfully clean shirt and a black apron. His face was pale, elongated, and his eyes stared too intently and were too dark. He slowly, almost mechanically, stepped into the light and nodded, indicating one of the tables by the window. "Thanks, buddy," I muttered, plopping down onto a creaky vinyl chair. "Tough haul. Strong coffee and a cheeseburger, well done. And make it quick, I won't be long." The waiter didn't answer. He just tilted his head to the side, as if listening to the echo of my words hanging in the dead air. "Hey, you hear me?" I asked, feeling my fatigue begin to give way to mild irritation. Then he came closer, and in the dim neon light I saw and felt a cold trickle of sweat run down my back. His lips were sewn shut, neatly with a thin black thread, stitch by stitch like from a medical textbook. The stitches were old, healed, but that only made the sight more horrifying. He wasn't a freak. The scars didn't disfigure him. They functionally, finally, and irrevocably sealed his mouth. Forever. I recoiled, elbowing a glass of toothpicks. It clinked, and the sound seemed deafeningly loud. The waiter just shook his head, and in his eyes I read no threat. No plea, only emptiness, a deep, bottomless void. He moved to the counter, his movement smooth, almost silent, and returned with a menu. A small, clean piece of paper and a ballpoint pen. He placed it all in front of me and took a step back, folding his hands on his apron, waiting. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat. My mind screamed to run immediately that something was wrong here, that all of this was wrong. But my body, exhausted from the road, refused to obey. Hunger and fatigue took over. Maybe it was some terrible accident, a burn, anything. It wasn't for me to judge. With a trembling hand, I wrote down my order. He nodded, took the note, and disappeared into the kitchen. I was alone. The silence was broken only by the faint hiss of the grill from behind the door and the silent laughter from the TV screen. I tried to distract myself by looking into the dark window, which reflected only myself and the gloomy interior of the cafe. Outside was only darkness, thick, impenetrable, alive. About 20 minutes passed. The waiter brought the order. The coffee was bitter and scalding hot, the burger dry and tasteless. I ate, feeling his heavy, motionless gaze on me. He stood in the corner and watched, always watched. I tried not to make eye contact, burying my head in the plate, and hurriedly chewed the food, washing it down with the disgusting coffee. My only thought was to pay and get out of this cursed place as soon as possible. When I pushed the plate away, he immediately approached. In his hand was not a bill, but the same small piece of paper, folded into a neat tube. He handed it to me. His fingers were long, pale, and cold when I took the paper. I reached for the money, but he shook his head, again pointing at the note. Awkwardly unfolding it, I expected to see numbers, the amount due. But instead, in perfect calligraphic handwriting, like a font from an old typewriter, it said, "Your car just started and drove away without you. He is in the trunk now. Do not turn around." My brain refused to process the meaning of the words. I reread the line, then again. "Your car? That's absurd. A multi-ton truck with the ignition off and drove away? He's in the trunk. Who is he?" And that idiotic "do not turn around." And at that very moment, as if on a terrible command, a sound came from the parking lot that froze the blood in my veins. A roar. The deep, powerful, unmistakable roar of my Volvo's diesel engine. It was followed by the grind of a gear engaging, and then the growing rumble, the sound of a truck driving off into the night. The sound died away in the distance until it dissolved into silence completely. I sat there, my fingers clutching the paper, unable to move. Cold horror, sticky and dense, bound me, nailing me to the chair. My truck, my home on wheels, my job, everything I have, was gone by itself. And something was in the trunk, in my trunk. I slowly raised my eyes to the waiter. He stood in the same place with the same absent expression on his face. He didn't look surprised. He looked as if everything happening was a long, scripted play, and he was just waiting for me to deliver my next line. "What? What was that?" I exhaled, forgetting he couldn't answer. "What kind of freak are you? What's happening?" He didn't react to the insult. Instead, he slowly raised his hand and pointed his index finger towards the window, into the night, then turned his finger and brought it to his sewn-shut lips in the universal gesture for quiet. "Do not turn around." The warning in the note flashed in my mind with new force. But turn around to what? I was already looking ahead. Fear was replaced by a wild animal panic. Adrenaline shot through my head. I jumped up, knocking over the chair with a crash. "They sewed your tongue, but your hands are still there." "Right, explain what the hell is going on here," I shouted, throwing that very piece of paper and the pen at him. He caught both with frightening dexterity. His eyes flashed for a moment with something ancient and inhuman. Then he unfolded the paper, placed it on the counter, and with the same methodical calmness began to write something on the back. Time stretched. Only my watch ticked and my heart beat, ready to burst out of my chest. He finished, turned the paper over, and slid it to my edge of the counter. His hand rested on top of the note, inviting me to read. Unable to control the trembling in my knees, I approached. On the paper was written, "He does not like noise. You woke him, he woke up hungry. He ate, now he will drive on. He liked your truck." I looked at these words, trying to comprehend the nonsense they carried. He woke up, ate? Who did he eat? My thoughts raced feverishly, clinging to shreds of logic that weren't there. "Who is he?" I whispered, and my voice broke. The waiter took the pen again. His movements were quick and precise. "The one who sleeps on the back of the world. The one whose name is not spoken. The debt collector. He chose you. Your road was loud. You attracted his attention. Mysticism. Pure, insane mysticism. But the sound of the departing truck was real. Those sewn-shut lips were real. This soul-chilling horror was the most real thing I had ever felt. What do I do? My voice was weak, like a child's. The waiter wrote one last phrase and stepped back, his mission seemingly complete. "Wait, or run. He will find you anyway. He already knows your taste." The last words drove an icy spike into me. Knows your taste? This wasn't just a monster that ate someone in my trunk. This was a connoisseur who had appreciated my life, my soul, my fate. I recoiled from the counter. Run, I have to run, anywhere, away from here. I bolted for the door, burst out onto the parking lot. The night swallowed me. It was so dark I couldn't see my own hands. No moonlight, no stars, just black, velvety, all-consuming gloom. And silence. That same absolute silence, but now it was filled with threat. There was something in it. I ran along the highway, not making out the road, stumbling over stones, choking on fear. I ran until a lump rose in my throat and a stitch stabbed my side. I looked back. The lights of the last stop cafe had already disappeared around the bend. I was alone in pitch darkness. And then I heard him. At first it was just a rustle somewhere behind, like a huge body rubbing against asphalt. Then heavy, wet puffing was added, as if something enormous and sick was breathing. I froze, listening, and my heart stopped. The sound was very close. Right behind me, remembering the warning in the note. Do not turn around. I curled into a ball, closed my eyes, praying for this to be a nightmare. The breathing grew louder. I felt it, warm, foul, smelling of rotten meat and gasoline. It washed over my neck. Something large and hard, like an insect's probe, touched the back of my head, as if tasting it. I couldn't take it. The instinct of self-preservation, stronger than any prohibition, made me turn around. The darkness behind me stirred. It wasn't just an absence of light, it was dense, alive, condensed matter. And in it for a moment something flashed. A huge, pale, toothless funnel-like mouth. Dozens of blind, milky eyes reflecting my face distorted by horror, and clawed paws digging into the asphalt. It looked like a giant, bloated gadfly made of shadows and nightmares. It made a sound, not a roar, not a bellow. It was the screech of metal breaking under a press, mixed with a quiet, childish cry. I screamed, and the darkness covered me head to toe. I came to from a vibration. A dull, rhythmic rumbling. I was lying on something hard and cold in complete darkness. My head was splitting. My whole body ached. I touched my face. It was wet with tears and something sticky. Where was I? What happened to me? I tried to sit up and hit my head on a low ceiling. A familiar smell hit my nostrils. Engine oil, an old blanket, and... myself, this was my van, the trunk of my Volvo. Memory returned to me in a burning wave. The cafe. The mute waiter, the note, the monster in the night. Growling with despair, I fumbled in the dark for the internal trunk handle. It wouldn't budge. The locks were engaged. I started hitting the lid, screaming, but the hum of the engine drowned out everything. The car was moving. By itself, driven by whatever was at the wheel now. I fell silent, collapsing onto the floor in exhaustion. My fingers stumbled upon something in the corner. Something small, rectangular, papery. I grabbed it, though it was impossible to see in the dark. I ran my fingertips over it, trying to understand. It was a business card. And then, above my head, from the cabin a sound came. A creak. Slow, drawn out as if something huge and awkward was turning in the driver's seat. That same wet puffing was heard. It was listening. I froze, holding my breath, clutching the ill-fated card in my sweaty palm. The creaking stopped. Another sound was heard, a light, barely perceptible rustle of paper, as if someone's long, bony fingers were unfolding a sheet. And then, through the roar of the engine, a new sound reached me. Quiet, measured, hypnotic, like a tapping. The tap of a ballpoint pen on a wooden tabletop. Tap, tap, tap. It was waiting. Waiting for my next stop, and I understood that now I was the one in the trunk, and that the next driver who entered the last stop cafe would receive a note from the mute waiter. And perhaps one of them would be meant for me. I sat in pitch darkness, listening to the steady hum of the engine and that terrifying, methodical tapping. Tap, 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 coming from the cabin. The sound was clear, merciless, as if counting down the seconds to my end. It was acting as if it weren't a monster from nightmares, but just a driver, perhaps lost in thought, tapping a pen on the steering wheel. But I knew. I had seen that thing. I had felt its breath. My fingers convulsively clenched that very scrap of paper, the business card found in the dark. I ran my thumbs over it, trying to read by touch what was embossed on it. The paper was thick, expensive. Under my nail I caught an indentation, a logo, a circle, and in it, a stylized wing. No, more like a bird. Then a line below, letters. I concentrated, desperately trying to distract myself from the tapping and the fact that I was locked in the trunk of my own truck, which was taking me into the unknown. I sounded out what I felt, letter by letter in a whisper. Avia. The word Avia. An airline. What the hell? The tapping in the cabin suddenly stopped. I froze, my heart pounding, ready to burst. I listened. Now only the roar of the engine and the whistle of wind outside the walls were audible. Why did it stop? Did it hear something? Did it sense my fear? Or had we arrived? The car began to slow down. There were no turns. We were driving straight, and now the engine shifted to low revs. The brakes sighed softly. Don't stop. For God's sake, don't stop, I prayed to myself. But the Volvo obediently continued to slow down and soon came to a smooth halt. The engine stalled, silence fell. Absolute deafening, the same kind that was in the cafe before it all began. I sat not breathing, tense, expecting anything. The creak of an opening door, the sound of footsteps, a blow to the trunk lid. But nothing happened. A minute, 2, 5. The silence pressed on my eardrums, becoming unbearable. What was it doing? Why was it just sitting? Maybe it left, abandoned the car, and disappeared. A weak, insane hope began to glow in my heart. Slowly, trying not to make a sound, I rose on my elbows and felt for the internal trunk handle again. I'd already tried it, useless. But now, in the silence, I heard a light, metallic click, as if the lock wasn't fully latched. My heart skipped a beat. Really? Did it make a mistake? Or was it a trap? There was no time to decide. This could be my only chance. Gathering all my will, I pressed the mechanism. A loud, deafening click sounded in the silence. I pushed the trunk lid open with all my might. It gave way with a creak, and cold night air, smelling of dust and wormwood, poured into the crack. I greedily inhaled it and stuck my head out, looking around. We were parked on the shoulder of the same deserted road. No lights, no signs of life. Just an endless dark ribbon of asphalt going nowhere. Flat, dark step to the right and left. The cabin was dark. I couldn't see what was inside. I didn't want to see it. Mindlessly, obeying the instinct to flee, I tumbled out of the trunk onto the asphalt, painfully hitting my knee. Got up, staggered away from the car, ready to run for my life wherever my eyes looked, and then my hand, still clutching the business card, bumped into something in my jacket pocket. Something hard, rectangular. Another object. I mechanically shoved my hand into my pocket and pulled it out. It was my own notepad, the one I usually use to write down routes and expenses. And with it, my own pen. I froze, not understanding. Where from? I didn't put it there. The last thing I remembered, the notepad was in the cabin on the passenger seat. So, it was in the cabin. It took my notepad and put it in my pocket. Why? With trembling hands I opened it. On the very first page, under my old notes, in perfect calligraphic handwriting, the same one from the waiter's note, was written, "Next stop, 35 miles. Cafe Wings. Don't be late. You are the courier now." And below, as if in confirmation, the same logo I had felt on the business card was drawn, a stylized bird in a circle. I raised my eyes to my truck. It stood as a grim red silhouette in the night, lifeless, quiet. There was no one in it. Or was there? The driver's door was slightly ajar. I was shaking. I was a courier for this. This thing, it didn't kill me. It gave me a task. And an intuition, chilling my already cold blood, suggested that refusing meant signing my own death sentence here and now. I looked at the road. 35 miles. On foot. Through the night backcountry without water or a weapon. That was a sure way to die. I had no choice. As if in a dream, I approached the cabin. The interior smelled foreign, that same sweetish putrid smell as in the cafe. On the driver's seat lay another note, pressed against the windshield from the inside by the wiper blade. Drive the car. Do not look back at the cargo. The cargo, the one that was in the trunk, the one it ate, or what it brought. I got behind the wheel, inserted the key into the ignition with stiff fingers. The steering wheel was sticky. I tried not to think about what with. The engine started on the first try. I turned on the headlights and two bright beams cut into the darkness, illuminating the empty road. I didn't look in the rear-view mirror. I was afraid of seeing something there looking back at me. I drove off. The next half hour was the most terrifying stretch of road in my life. Every sound, every creak of the body made me flinch. I expected to hear a screech, a knock from the trunk, for the note to be a lie, and for it to already be here behind my back. But it was quiet. Too quiet. Ahead, in the distance, a dim point of light appeared. It grew, turning into familiar outlines. A low building, a neon sign, fading letters. Wings. The same architecture as the last stop. The same empty parking lot. I braked, killed the engine. My hands were sticky with sweat. What to do next? Go in? But there. Would there be another waiter like that? Or was it I got out of the car? My legs were giving way. The air was still and cold. I walked to the cafe door. Through the fogged glass I saw movement. There was someone there. Not the waiter. An older man in a trucker's cap. He was talking animatedly to the bartender. So there were people here. Living people. Relief, sweet and intoxicating, washed over me. I pulled the door handle. The bell jangled just as unpleasantly as in that other place. The two men at the counter turned around. The bartender, the same one. Tall, thin, with a sewn-shut mouth. His dead eyes met mine, and he nodded almost imperceptibly as if expecting me. The second man, the trucker, grinned widely. Finally, he said in a booming voice. I was starting to think my order got lost. Tony, right? I was speechless. How did he know my name? The mute bartender slid out from behind the counter and went outside, heading towards my truck, towards the trunk. Hey, you look like a ghost, the guy continued, spitting sunflower seed shells on the floor. All pale. Road was tough, huh? I get it, brother, I get it. I just came from the past myself. Damn black ice. He chattered, and I couldn't utter a word. I watched as the mute waiter approached my car, unlatched the trunk, and leaned over it. He was doing something there, unloading something, or loading. So you got my package? The trucker asked cheerfully, coming up to me and slapping me on the shoulder. His hand was heavy and rough. They told me it was with you. I was silent. I didn't understand what he was talking about. What package? And then my gaze fell on the bar counter. Next to a dirty ashtray lay my notepad. Open. On a clean page in the same calligraphic handwriting, it was written, "Give him the keys to the truck. That is his payment. The keys to my Volvo. My home. My life. Hey buddy, you okay?" The trucker's voice became wary. "You look like you've seen the devil." I had seen something worse. I had seen the system. A ruthless, well-oiled machine whose cogs were all of us. Drivers, waiters, cafes on the outskirts. And now I had become a part of it. The mute waiter returned to the cafe. He looked at me, then at the trucker, and nodded towards the door. The deed was done. The cargo delivered. Or received. I didn't know. I didn't want to know. The trucker, not waiting for an answer, shrugged and went outside. A moment later, the roar of a started engine came from the parking lot. My engine. I saw the lights of my Volvo flash, turn around and disappear into the night. He drove off in my truck, and he didn't even know what he was carrying with him. I was left standing in the middle of the cafe, devastated, with the keys to a truck that no longer existed in my hand. The mute waiter returned behind the counter and began silently wiping a glass. He became just part of the interior again. On the table, where he had glanced, lay a new business card and a new note. "Your truck is waiting around back. The next point on the map is marked. Do not be late. He does not like to wait." I slowly walked over and took the note. And then the card. This time the logo was different, not a bird, but something like a drop or a tear, and the address was different. I went out the back door of the cafe. On a small dirt lot stood a truck, an old weathered man truck in a dirty white color. It looked completely normal. The key was in the ignition. I walked around it and mechanically, almost without thinking, unlatched the trunk. It was empty, clean. It smelled of ozone and sterile cleanliness, like in an operating room. I slammed it shut and climbed into the cab. The interior smelled of foreign tobacco and old booze. On the passenger seat lay an open map. A route was marked on it. And the next point, the tier of Cassiopeia diner by the old port. I started the engine. It roared, obedient and powerful. I put my hand on the gearshift lever, and then my fingers felt something rough on the handle. I looked down. On the black plastic, someone had scratched a single, crude but recognizable symbol with a sharp object. A stylized wing, the sign of wings, a warning or a reminder that I was part of this now, forever. I engaged the gear and pulled away, carrying with me the silence and a new foreign cargo I was afraid to even think about. The road was ahead, and the endless night.